All right, thanks a lot, Matej. All right, so today we'll talk about SAP security and why it's important to secure your SAP system. So my name is Francois Mariel, French, living in Prague for 10 years. I've been in Accenture for the same amount of time. And I'm mainly focusing on SAP, Salesforce, and globally platform security domain. We have Joerg, leading Bowbridge companies, which is a German-based companies focusing on, let's say, SAP security on the applications layer, promoting antivirus for SAP. So this is the tram of our presentations. So we'll start with the purpose, right? Why it's important to secure SAP. Going into like market trends, going into the security challenges we have on the market, going next into Jaguar Land Rover. I attended few sessions today, and we had many questions about the study case, so we'll try to answer them. And the last part of the presentation is focusing on the offering we have within Accenture and how we can answer the client request and most likely all challenges we see all over the world. So first of all, let's start from the beginning. Who knows what is SAP, right? This is first questions. I know we have some SAP practitioners in the room, but it's a German company best known for the enterprise resource planning software, right? So try to consider SAP as a brain for the company operations. It's manage the business processes into an integrating way. So SAP was founded by 5 security engineers from IBM in the 70s. And I believe right now we have like around 450,000 companies running on SAP all over the world.
Let me just add to this, just add a little color. So the funny thing is we've been hearing a lot about AI here today. Everybody's all over AI. The funny thing is those 5 guys who founded SAP in 1972. Were you around 1972? I was around. I was 1 year old. And those 5 guys who founded SAP, they were actually back in 1972, they were from the AI department of IBM. And they left IBM and then they co-founded SAP. So we're going full circle, 1972 to 2025, and we're still talking about AI.
Right, you see some market trends on the slide. I will not go deep dive into this presentation, so at least into the numbers you see on the slide. But try to imagine all departments of one organizations, which can be accounting, finance, procurement, supply chains, running on one single central system. And try to imagine now if this central system is compromised. The impact might be huge, right? We are talking about like damage of reputation for the companies. We are talking about like losing like tons of sensitive information. And this is what's happened on Jaguar Land Rover, right? A couple of months ago, at least a couple of weeks ago, and this is what we'll discuss in a while. So now we are basically looking at this slide on the business impact for the SAP breaches, right? So as I told you, like there are let's say 4 main categories. Operational descriptions, right, about the activities, which can cost millions in terms of lost revenues. We are talking about like financial losses. We are talking about reputational damage, and of course regulatory consequences, because we are talking about GDPR, SOX controls, and a lot of baseline, right?
Again, let me try to add a little color here. If we talk about operational disruptions, if you think of SAP as being the brain of your company, think of what you can do if your brain shuts down. Not much, right? So the company can't do anything if SAP is shut down. It can't It will disrupt the supply chain, so it can't procure anything. It will disrupt the sales processes because it cannot create any invoices, any quotations. It will disrupt a lot of the financials because all of the finance transactions go through SAP. It will disrupt personnel because all of the HCM runs through SAP. So all of the key pillars that support the business operations are actually concentrated in SAP. So if that fails, the entire company fails. And we would see that in the case study later on. And just in terms of giving you a little bit of the scale of what SAP is doing in the market space, we talked about financial operations. There's a statistic saying that 77% of any transaction in the world touches an SAP system or goes through an SAP system at some point, right? So 3/4 of any business transactions touch an SAP system at some point. And a number that I found even more interesting, and we were just discussing whether we're wine or beer drinkers, 77% of all of the beer worldwide is actually manufactured by companies who run SAP. So just imagine that going down, disaster.
Hopefully there is no damage, so I think we still have possibilities to have some beers after these conferences. Right. All right, the macro level like security challenges for SAP. First of all, I think today's, at least this conference is the sexiest, not the sexiest conference ever, right? It's very complex. SAP is extremely complex. That's why it's extremely difficult to hire, to understand the business, to run on SAP. The user experience is, I will say, not really the best in the world. And I do not think this is going to improve somehow, or maybe with AI. But going into SAP system is not the sexiest things ever. Maybe you want to
Yeah, sure. Let me. So complexity, just to give you like a feeling of the complexity of an SAP system. So at heart, I'm a techie, right? So I'm thinking in code. How many millions of lines of code do you think the entire Microsoft Office suite is comprised of? Just give me a number. Millions of lines of code, Microsoft Office. How many? 100? Well, actually, it's around 32 million lines of code is the entire Microsoft Office suite. The SAP ABAP stack, 238 million lines of code. And that's just the ABAP stack, right? Without any customizations. So it's like a crazy amount of complexity in that software. That's way more complex than all of the Office suite. Which is why we require experts that actually focus on certain areas of SAP in order to make the best use of the product and implement it in the most efficient and most secure ways for customers.
Thank you. Second point is basically on patch management, right? So SAP is releasing new patches every second Tuesday of the month. So it means we need to have a team which needs to connect or have manual effort or having a tool, an automated tool, which will basically look at the new patches released by SAP. This brings a lot of complexity. When we are talking about patches, we are also talking about different severities. So low, medium, high, and at any time, SAP can release what we call hot news, right? So we need to have people who will look at the SAP patches in order to either apply them, either not, right? This is a risk to take. And after, this is also based on the, let's say, risk-based mapping. Do I want to apply the low severity patches in order to cover, let's say, 80% of the risk, or do I want to focus first on the high, critical, or hot news? This is a very important effort and focus to have. That's why there are some automated tool or platform on the market which gives this possibility of appliance in an automatic way. Third topic, integration security gap. Joerg, I don't know if you want to share a few words about this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so obviously in a system that is as complex as SAP, where you have multiple components working together, integrating them is a major task. And one of the big strengths of SAP in general is that it can be heavily customized. So SAP was actually one of the first open source solutions. Like the business logic in the SAP application has always been open source. So companies can adapt the SAP software to their business processes and don't have to adapt their business processes to the software, which is one of the big strengths of SAP. However, when they integrate these different components into the solution that really maps their business processes to the software, security is not always top of mind. Right? So companies are building solutions, they're integrating third-party products, they're integrating external data sources without really having security in mind. So making sure that when they do these integrations, they do them securely is one of the tasks that Accenture and us have set out to tackle for the customers.
Right, the next 3 points, or 2 points actually, are about lack of expertise, and I will say a few words about security versus continuity. So I've been in this field for 15 years, and I will say definitively we are lacking talent. It's extremely difficult to find SAP people, SAP skilled people, and especially SAP security people. Extremely difficult.
Unicorns.
Unicorns, exactly, yeah. So the good news is Accenture is still hiring. So if you know anyone interested to join the practice, we can definitively talk about it with a beer after this conference. And Joerg, maybe last point, a few words.
Security versus continuity. Yeah, well, I've been in cybersecurity for almost 30 years, and in many situations, you run into companies where when they add security after the fact, you may know that in security there's this concept of shift left, which means implementing security earlier in the process, but that hasn't always been the case. So companies started deploying solutions, and then they added security afterwards. Ideally without disrupting the service that was already running, right? And we're actually seeing the same thing in AI today, where lots of companies are setting out to implement AI, and security is an afterthought. I always say the S in AI stands for security. So that's really something that companies need to look at, because they don't want to disrupt the business operations by adding security tools. So that's really one of the big challenges, is to make sure that you maintain continuity in the operation of the solution and not disrupt it by adding security, or by even implementing too tight of security controls that would ultimately break business processes.
All right, so let's talk quickly about the measure for SAP. So when we talk about SAP, or at least when we think about SAP security, I will say that 99% people will limit this to role and authorizations. This is not valid anymore for a long time. This goes far beyond role authorizations, passwords, or firewall, right? We need to look at capabilities on infrastructure. We need to look at capabilities running on the applications layer. So I'm talking here about monitoring, hardening, globally security assessment. This is key. This is not just about securing SAP. This is about building foundations to make the companies resilient again, cyber security attack. We need to make sure that the business is running smoothly. We need to make sure that the information, the data are protected. All right, now let's talk quickly about the Jaguar Land Rover attack. I'm not sure if you guys hear about this case lately. Have you? Yeah. Okay.
Is anybody driving? Anybody driving a Jaguar? Land Rover, maybe? No. Okay then.
All right. So this case is quite practical. It shows why SAP security is important, right? Why we need to apply patches. Why it's important to make some assessment. Why security is not just the focus of the security people, but the focus on like each employee in the companies. So here we are referring to cybersecurity attack, which I believe started at the end of August, and had huge impact on the company operations, right? The attack exploited vulnerabilities in SAP NetWeaver, which is like third-party software, right? To gain unauthorized access to a lot of sensitive data.
Let me add a little bit to this. Like I said, I'm a techie, right? So I really dig those things, and I dig into those things. So what happened at Jaguar Land Rover is there was a vulnerability in SAP that had already been patched, actually, right? So a patch was available, but for some reason that patch was not deployed. And like Francois was saying, we're talking security versus continuity, so they had to make a decision whether or not they wanted to deploy the patch, and for some reasons they didn't. Francois also made the case that it's very important to gauge the criticality of a patch when making the decision whether to deploy it or not. Now, this specific vulnerability was a CVSS 10.0. That's the highest criticality in terms of vulnerability that exists. But for some reason, that patch was not installed. And the vulnerability, what it did, it allowed an external hacker, attacker, whoever, who didn't need to be authenticated, so it didn't have to be a user of the system. Anyone who was able to access the system, who reach it, would be able to exploit it. And the attack works in two phases. In phase number one, you were able to upload something onto the system. And in phase number two, you were able to then execute that software, that tool that you uploaded, onto the system. So you would actually compromise the system all the way down to the operating system, right? And that's why it's a CVSS 10.0. It's a full remote code execution vulnerability. And it was part of the SAP NetWeaver stack, so the applications, the Java flavor of the application server. And that's the vulnerability that was allegedly exploited in the Java Land Rover case as the initial access. Now, as we know in security, what attackers do, and there are some research going on that this was likely a state actor that did this because there was no ransom that was asked. They were just really just disrupting the service. And what we do see many times in these types of attacks is there's an initial attack vector where the attacker gets a foothold on the system, and then they move laterally. They compromise other systems. And SAP is really a prime target for that because many SAP applications are interconnected, right? You compromise one application, and then from a risk management perspective, you actually have to consider the entire system to be compromised because you can move from one system to another. There's built-in connections, RFCs and RPCs and connections between the systems where you transfer data, transports. So they managed to get access to a critical system using a CVSS 10.0 vulnerability. They exploited the system. They basically owned the entire system. And then they were able to move laterally to other SAP applications and then to other non-SAP applications. Which leads us to number two. If you don't mind, I'll just start babbling away. So what leads us to part number two here, and that is the entire manufacturing of all of Jaguar Land Rover came to a complete stop. So they were not able to manufacture cars, they were not able to deliver cars, they were not able to pay their suppliers, they were not able to order components, they were not able to pay their employees. So basically the worst case scenario that we just painted here and saying, if your brain fails, your body fails, this is what happened at Jaguar Land Rover. The SAP system failed, and then some other system failed, and the complete company came to a full stop. Nothing worked. Of course, they did some research. They tried to bring out the system. It ultimately took them something like 6 weeks until they were able to slowly restart production. Now, if you think of the business impact of a company like Jaguar Land Rover standing still for 6 months, for 6 weeks, it's crazy. I think the damage was.
I think we are talking about 50 million pounds per week as a lost revenue, which is huge. Yeah.
So at some point, the UK government had to give Jaguar Land Rover a loan guarantee for 1.5 billion pounds, just so that they were able to continue the operation. I heard that there were like 66,000 cars they weren't able to deliver as part of this. And the overall operational loss was something like 120 million pounds, which is a crazy amount. Now, what hasn't even been looked at in this scenario is, due to the interconnected nature of SAP systems that are not just interconnected within one organization, but that's something that we've been seeing starting maybe like 10 years ago, is that SAP systems in one organization talk to SAP systems in other organizations, right? Back in the day, like 20 years ago, SAP systems used to be way in the back of the company, locked away and only accessed internally. But now these systems are interconnected internally and externally. So just think of the backflow on the supply chain. There are many suppliers who supply tools, materials, components to Jaguar Land Rover in real time. Right? Everybody's talking about just-in-time production. So the stuff coming in, being built into cars right away. Now there's a backlog building up, right? So because Jaguar Land Rover did not take those parts because they couldn't manufacture the parts, so that has an impact upstream in the supply chain. And there were many companies who really struggled as a result of this attack. So it didn't affect only Jaguar Land Rover, but also many companies in their ecosystem. Upstream, so suppliers who provided parts, but also downstream, car dealers who weren't able to deliver cars. So it's a massive impact. And those numbers that we presented here, 120 million in damage, that's just Jaguar Land Rover. It doesn't even take into account the upstream and the downstream damages.
This raises also 2 points. The first one is cyber security measure of Jaguar Land Rover itself. And for the fun point, I've been asked 2 or 3 years ago to create a proposal on running an assessment on SAP to highlight the vulnerabilities, the existing vulnerabilities at Jaguar Land Rover, right? And we didn't proceed. Client decided not to proceed, right? So this could have been easily avoided, at least highlighted and avoided. This is first point. We're not talking about huge amount of days. I would say typically running some pen tests or running an assessment using a automated tool. We could do an assessment from experience in 2 or 3 weeks, right? Depends what we are talking about, patch management, compliance, threat monitoring, code review, different capabilities. But in 15 days, 3 weeks of time, we can definitively have something solid, something tangible in your hands. Not only a report for like techies, but a report also for the executive, something to eat, something to digest. When we run some pen tests, some assessment, client is always surprised, maybe in a good or bad way, but always surprised. They never realized they are running, or they will run like thousands of security nodes behind, or they never realized how customized the code was, etc. So this is first point about the security assessment, which raise the cyber security capabilities with the Land Rover. And globally, I would say this raises also the questions of the cyber security measure, or this highlights the vulnerabilities we have globally in the automotive industries. And I think competitor will definitively have an interest raised on running some security assessment, using some tools or using people doing manual pen tests, for instance. Any questions about Jaguar Land Rover case?
There is one already on Slido.
All right. Do you want? Should we go through now or after the?
We can take them after, but if you want to. So who do take support for Land Rover? SAP or Accenture?
Let me answer that. So actually, it's Niesler, and then I suggest we take the questions at the end. But this one, so no, Jaguar Land Rover is not an Accenture customer, and also they're not a Bowbridge customer yet.
All right, let's go to the next slide. I'm not a big fan of sales speech, but the key message here is to look at the SAP program on a macro level way, right? I can definitively share the slides after the conferences, but we need to look at the applications layer. We need to look at the infrastructure layer, starting by small, which can be a quick assessment, right? Or like something much like bigger, important, running a workshop with a CISO or like moving to the cloud. We are talking about the cloud now a lot, AI a lot, right? So we need to make sure that before moving to the cloud, or at least we need to ensure that the level of security is as high after moving than before. We need to make sure that the pillars are secure, right? And always the keyword is making recommendations, running an assessment, making recommendations, giving the best practices. So it's basically the holistic approach, holistic security journey. So here is like, it's quite dense, but as I told you, we have this comprehensive security approach for SAP environment. We have different blocks, as you can see on the screen, right? On the left is basically an assessment of our health check. Can be like small or like much bigger in terms of durations. We are talking about technical scan. We are talking about interviews. We are talking about like business process reviews. And on the right part of the slide, you see let's say the considerations. I'm focusing on platform securities. I've been working with vendors for 10 years. We'll talk about Bowbridge capabilities in a few minutes. So we can basically focus on a lot of capabilities. You can see different blocks here, cyber resilience, hybrid infrastructure, DevOps, applications, and we start obviously looking at, or at least we already started looking at artificial intelligence capabilities here. So this is a journey, right, from the initial phases, running an assessment, making some gap analysis, trying to understand what works versus not, going into like development and discovery phase, and of course the optimization phase, implementing the measure, making sure that we are running a scan to see if we improved like from the start, giving recommendations, sticking to the best practices. Clients are always interested, from experience, to know what the competitors are doing in the industries. If I'm talking to automotive like client, they definitely want to know what the competitor like do, right?
Yeah, and actually I like the arrow on that slide, but what we do see in organizations is typically that this is actually a circular process, right? So we keep saying that after the assessment or after the pen test is before the pen test. So you do something, you implement something, and then you test again, and very likely you will find something else because the threat landscape is changing, because the systems are changing. So you will discover something else, and then you go back through the cycle. You test, you implement, you verify, and then you test again, right? And it's a continuous process. You're never done with security, which is why I like it so much. It's always, there's always something new.
So as I told you, We have a lot of capabilities. Accenture is having like skilled SAP people, skilled SAP security people, and I do like the fact we are also engaging with different vendors on different spheres. You see a couple of logos on this slide. We are looking like different sphere, identity and access management. We are looking at like SAP securities, role and authorizations, right? So we have some vendor partnership focusing on specific streams. And now I would like to share a few words about Bowbridge, right? Which is collaborations we are making on the applications layer, promoting antivirus for SAP.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I want to go back to Jaguar Land Rover, and so there's a couple of lessons that we can all learn from the Jaguar Land Rover case, because the impact that we saw was 100% preventable. If Jaguar Land Rover had implemented a solid patch management process, supported by tools that exist in the market, supported by partners who understand SAP security, the vulnerability would have been patched. Right? That's a CVSS 10.0. And Francois was saying about being able to gauge the criticality of security patches, whether they need to be applied or not, gauging whether a certain patch is at all applicable to my application. All of that can very easily be done with tools that are in Accenture's portfolio and leveraging the expertise that exists within Accenture. So if the patch had been deployed, the vulnerability could not have been exploited. That's one mitigation. The other mitigation is if they had deployed our product or our solution, then the first phase of the attack would have been blocked. Because what our solution does is we detect any file transfers in SAP and we scan them, not just for malware, but also for any type of SAP-specific vulnerability. So that initial attack vector phase where the attacker uploaded something onto that vulnerable application server would have been blocked. Right? It's one very simple rule in our product, say if it's executable, block it. And that would have broken the attack chain at phase one. Right? So even if they had not been able to deploy the patch because they had continuity requirements that didn't allow them to take the system offline for, I don't know, half an hour to deploy the patch, if they had deployed a solution like this, which is, by the way, recommended best practice by SAP. So SAP has this thing they call the S/4HANA security guide, and there's an entire chapter on this topic of preventing and securing file upload vulnerabilities. So that's what we as a company are doing and have been doing very successfully for 20 years. It's really securing file transfers in SAP applications at the application layer. Because there's the very common misconception that if you have something at the OS layer, it will protect your SAP application, but the truth is it does not. It doesn't even see those file transfers. So that's what we're doing at a very high level. Think of it as antivirus for SAP, but that's really the shrink-wrapped version. It's actually a bit more complex than that, but that's maybe the phrase and the mantra that you can remember as what we're doing. We've been doing that, like I said, for 20 years. We're celebrating 20 years of Bowbridge in November. So we've been doing that at many, many companies, but not at Jaguar Land Rover yet.
Maybe soon then. Yeah. All right, so I think we are done with presentations. We can take some questions, but in a nutshell, securing SAP is foundations of for trust, for resilience, right, and for success. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add to that as a summary, think of your SAP applications as the crown jewels of your IT. Right? If anything else breaks down, it will not have as big an impact as if your SAP system goes down. And if you think of your SAP application as the crown jewels, then it's very logical that you should apply the best possible security controls to protect those crown jewels, because you don't want them to fall in anybody's hand or to be compromised or even stolen. So with that, thank you very much for sticking with us until the very end of Open Slava. Thank you for joining us, and let's see what questions we have.
Maybe I can read them out loud.
Please.
So the first one is, in many companies, transformation to SAP S/4HANA is ongoing. From your experience, are companies in general considering cybersecurity when conducting this kind of transformation?
So are cybersecurity considerations part of the scope of S/4HANA or S/4 transformations? I think they are, and I think there's a lot more awareness in the market about security for SAP applications than there used to be 10 years ago. Right? So it's much more visible, and incidents like Jaguar Land Rover, as unfortunate as they may be, they help raise the visibility of the case for SAP security. So from my perspective at Bowbridge, I can say definitely yes. We're getting a lot of customers who contact us based on requirements of the S4 transformation, right? So they're actually going through the security guide and say, okay, this is a recommendation by SAP, we should be doing something. And then they approach Accenture and say, hey, you guys are running our transformation project, what should we do about this specific attack vector and others? And that's how these projects pop up.
I think I will relate to what Karel said previous conferences. This is not just security is not just about like the security people. We need to improve the awareness. We need like to improve the cyber security culture within each organization. SAP is definitively extremely complex. We have guidelines. There's a lot of documentations. We need to have specific people. That's why I believe consulting companies are there and bringing a lot of values to give guidance, answering questions from like each customer. Yeah.
We have another Mariel and Joerg. You know, how did they learn from the incident, and what are they doing differently now?
Well, I don't have that level of insight, but given that the entire system went down, I think that was noticed pretty quickly. What are they doing differently now? Honestly, I can't say. Like I said, they're not a customer, neither of Accenture's nor of Bowbridge's, but I think what they will be doing now is they will be looking with a lot more attention to detail into what the security offering is and what they can do to improve their security posture. And they might be looking for a new outsourcing partner. I heard they had like an external company that outsourced security and consulting. It might not be around much longer.
They will definitively patch, also apply the patches right on time, and definitively consider some assessment, some implementations of automatic tool, right? Because we could have these situations could have been easily avoided, right? And this is a pity. I would say,
of course, the external
now,
supplier can do something, but if they don't have the audit?
I would say running an assessment will give you some light already, right? Because we can focus on code review or patch management or compliance, threat monitoring, whatever like blocks we are thinking about. But I would say that the responsibility, the acceptance of the risk is owned by the end client, right? Which question is this? Oh, okay.
Do you also include infrastructure security or just SAP?
No, we are looking at, like at least in Accenture, we have personally looked at the, let's say, applications layer, but we do have also capabilities on the infrastructure part. And it's not just silo. We need to look at the global picture, global journey to protect the business. Yeah.
All right. Well, then, thank you very much.